Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Wayne's World, part one of our ASTV on the Ice program. As always, Wayne Kosior joining us from the comforts of his own home. Wayne, how was the weekend? Are you getting ready for the trick-or-treaters?
Yeah, pretty soon. I guess the trick-or-treaters will be coming here this weekend, and I had a great weekend. Did a little traveling through Alberta, watching some hockey, so it was a great weekend.
You're enjoying the fact that there's no snow on the ground for all these road trips. I mean, Winnipeg, Prince Albert, a little bit of Alberta. I mean, it's a whole lot nicer when there's less white stuff on the ground. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm kind of getting all these trips in now before the snow flies, because then traveling is questionable.
Now, it's Wayne, you're just not watching your boy play on the Prince Albert Raiders. Are you checking out the other teams as well? Because I know you got a couple of hats to wear into all these weekend road trips and all these hockey games, right?
Exactly. I'm watching a whole lot of things and stuff like that, both in person in the arena and online and stuff. So wearing a lot of hats for sure.
Have you noticed a little bit of rust on the skates, or now that we're almost at the end of October, it's mostly gone and the players are not only just happy to be playing a regular season, but they're putting their best skate forward now?
Yeah, for sure. I think the play is picking up at every level and on every team that I've been watching, type thing and stuff, as players get used to each other and get used to the systems that their coaches are using. And you can tell that there's lots of fans in the stands that are excited to see live hockey, just like you and I are.
No, that's the big thing, is just the fact that these small communities get to have those, original, genuine sounds in the arena instead of the odd glimpses of, the odd cheer. But most often than not, silence is not golden when it comes to a hockey rink.
Yeah, absolutely. And so anybody who hasn't been taking the time to go out for junior hockey games or even prep midget games, take advantage of it. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely. Speaking of this past weekend, when I know you had a road trip, but there was also a Western Hockey League Cup going down this weekend. This is something that kind of just crept in on the radar. Now, this is not the first time it's being held. It's an annual event, or what used to be an annual event, and it has representatives from all four Western provinces. Give us a bit of a rundown how it works, Wayne, and what you took from this past weekend.
Right. So, I mean, the high level summary is it's each province in Western Canada puts together a provincial team. This year it's the 2006s. And so typically the WHL draft has always happened in the May timeframe. So we would have known who many of these players are drafted by and who they're going to. But this year is unique. And I think, a real advantage to both players and scouts and GMs that they can actually have this WHL Cup in advance of the draft, which this year is going to happen in December due to kind of COVID. And I know the WHL has been looking at, will they continue to do that or not? But again, it's going to work out real well. So it was a chance for these 2006s to show their stuff against their peers. And it's also a chance for all the teams and the scouts and GMs to have a look at these players a little closer. And I guess literally 6 weeks in advance of the draft. So again, sounds like it was a great tournament. The BC team came out victorious with a 5-2 victory over Alberta. Saskatchewan edged Manitoba 3-2 in the bronze medal game. And so it was a very competitive tournament this year, as it typically always is, and a lot of great players.
Some things to consider. I mean, you look at the fact that this is just 6 weeks removed from the Western Hockey League draft for some of these players, if not all of these players. It kind of gives them that opportunity to show their best foot as close to that draft. Because really, when you think about it, there shouldn't be that much of a difference of a player within 6 weeks of being looked at in that first, second round, or whatever round selection, right, Wayne?
Exactly. This is the closest any WHL teams have been able to see players to, the age and time that they'll play in the league. So I think that's a benefit to all parties. And I think it allows the GMs and scouts to talk to the players that they're interested in, ensure that they think from a personality perspective, maybe an attitude perspective, maybe even a geographic location perspective, that player would report to their team, and vice versa. The same thing for players and parents to check out with teams that are interested in them, and how interested they are in drafting them, and confirm whether their son will is excited to go to that location, so to say, or not, type thing. And it helps teams make a decision. And, I know it's something that players and parents always struggle with. Should they tell a team that no, they're not interested in playing in location X or Y. I'm personally a fan of, if you don't think you're going to be happy or it's not a good suit for yourself or a good match for yourself, I think you should be open and honest on that. And I think teams respect that. Sure, the odd team may get upset if they're really high on you type thing. And some teams will just ignore your comment and still draft you in some cases. So bottom line is, I'm a big fan of just being open and honest on both sides. And it allows teams and players to end up with the best matches possible.
So, Wayne, can I ask you this question? All of these players who were participating in this WHL Cup, none of them have rights or drafted rights to any organization just above and beyond this year, correct? Like, nobody's signed to a WHL team. Nobody's protected in any way, shape, or form, right?
So you're saying that if they are drafted in this upcoming draft, the 2006?
So I'm saying previous to this draft, like, nobody's rights or responsibilities are to any team in the Western Hockey League or a Junior Hockey League or Division I, anything like that.
Well, the only thing, and I have to check on the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League still has a draft, and I don't know what they did with the COVID, if they've held that. I think they were going to move theirs to match the WHL. Quite often, there will be that draft shortly after the WHL draft, but I think you would be correct in that nobody is contractually signed to anybody. So anybody that may be verbally committed to a college, again, that's not a legal contract or commitment to anybody. It's just strictly verbal. And so, yeah, I think you're accurate in saying that they're all free agents going into this.
So the fact that we have a crop, for lack of a better term, 85 players or so, the best players in Western Canada, 2006 and younger, does that offer a bit of an opportunity for some of these players to maybe think outside of the Western Hockey League box per se, and maybe stay, let's say, in the BCHL, or maybe go to the Okotoks or the Brooks Bandits, or maybe head down to the Western or the USHL perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big consideration on both sides of the fence, again, both from the team perspective and from the player perspective. And it'll be a key part of any discussions with players to ensure, as far as from a WHL perspective, that their plan is to pursue WHL versus the NCAA. Because, if there is, some players likely in most cases don't know 100% for sure which way they're going. But, if they say, I'm leaning heavily towards NCAA, or I prefer NCAA or whatever, the teams need to question that. And, it's important that the players kind of have an idea going in, because it helps the teams to draft and stuff. And I know there's always a little bit of gamesmanship sometimes that players, may say they're going NCAA, so they'll drop in the draft and be able to get picked by their preferred team and stuff. But again, I go back to the old openness and honesty is the best policy, and I think it'll serve you, the players and the teams, best in the long run.
Let's just hope you shake hands with Kersplash's dad and you hear the words. You don't hear the words, "My word is as solid as an oak." Jerry Maguire, 95. We'll leave it at that, right, Wayne?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I do bring that up because we've talked many times on our segments here on Wayne's World on ASTV with regards to how the drafting procedure is never linear, and there's always that opportunity for a player, let's say, that gets drafted by a WHL team, but then goes to a prep academy program that's still in the States or back in Canada, but then has that opportunity to have their rights borrowed or lent to them for that season to go play in the USHL or a different junior program. How important is it for players and parents to understand that the drafting procedure is rarely linear unless you were drafted in those first two rounds?
Yeah, I think it's an important point that you raise. And I know, the draft is obviously a very exciting time for players and parents and teams alike. But sometimes I think, players and parents in particular put too much weight into the WHL draft on whether, where they maybe go in the draft, or worst case scenario, they don't get drafted. And, to your point, we can all cite instances where players were drafted in the first round of the WHL draft. In some cases, do not go on to play in the WHL, either because they went NCAA or just playing because they didn't make it. There's also an even longer list of players that went undrafted in the WHL draft and went on to become stars in the WHL and the NHL and stuff. So, it's important that parents and players realize that it's just a snapshot in time. That's the best way I've heard it described is that at that particular time, a team thought you were placed, say, in the first, second, third, fourth round and no round. But it's what's important is what happens the next day and go forward. That's really going to determine where you're going to play, how soon you're going to play there, how well you're going to do and stuff like that. So, I think it's important, it's an exciting time. Enjoy the experience, but don't get too high if you're drafted really high, and don't get too low if you're drafted low, or don't get drafted at all, because in the long run, it absolutely means nothing.
I think like it's exactly that. It's a moment in time. It's certainly a time or a set of events that you can put your hat on and say, okay, it's an accomplishment, but it's what you do afterwards. And for those that don't have a chance to put on that jersey or have their name called, that also tests their perseverance and how much they truly want to accomplish this dream or this opportunity still, even though there is a couple of setbacks. I mean, Dorothy always had a yellow brick road, but that's only one person. And Lord knows, hills, valleys, ebbs and flows, mountain peaks and riversides. We live on the plains, Wayne. So it's one of the things where you have to go spread your wings a bit and see what happens.
Yeah, and like I say, there's numerous studies, and I think I've cited them before on our chats type thing and stuff, that those players that do face adversity and are able to overcome adversity, and that starts from being a late birth month in a year where you're always playing with older players, to not getting drafted, numerous things that they encounter can make you a better person and a better player, and there are studies that prove it. And trust me, scouts at the higher levels and certainly at the NHL look at that stuff in depth. And like I say, a classic example would be Mark Giordano, right? He's probably the most classic example of a player that was never drafted until just this past year in the expansion draft for Seattle. A 15-year NHLer, top NHL defenseman award type thing and stuff, captain his team for like the last close to 10 years, I think. Never drafted at any level until the expansion draft, which is totally a different animal type thing. And so it's important that the message is, I guess, to the guys that get drafted first overall, don't take that for granted, and don't think that suddenly gets you in the door and will make you a great player, because there's some kid that didn't get drafted that's maybe hungrier than you, is going to work harder and overtake you. And again, I got a long list of players that you could cite that do that. So it's important that both the players drafted high continue to work hard and continue their development. And it's also as important the players that don't get drafted continue to focus and work on their development if they want to chase that dream, because it's very achievable.
And as great as your parents will be pumping your tires because you're a family member, or deflating them if they're that kind of parent too. I mean, we have both sides of the spectrum there. It's always great to get a third-party consensus or an advisement from a person like yourself, Wayne, because it's important to explain to a player that this is not the end of the road unless you want it to be the end of the road. You
Absolutely.
can make it in any different way. You can have many different circlings of the wagons, and you can have many opportunities to play at a next level. It may not be the level you want, but at the same time, you can always look at it as being a stepping stone up.
Absolutely. I mean, there's many routes to let's use the WHL as an example. So you could go straight from midget AAA. You can go from your prep school. You can work your way through junior A type thing and stuff. And so again, all those examples apply. There's players probably that, I can't think of the top of my head, but probably play junior B and work their way up there and stuff. And so if you really want it, you got to do the work, and then the rewards are a good opportunity. They'll be there for you and stuff. And and I think to close, one of the things I'd like to, just mention, because maybe some of our viewers and both players and parents can recognize some of these names. If you think about players like Shea Weber, Jamie Benn, Jake Bean, Duncan Keith, Colton Sissons, those are players that were not drafted in the WHL draft and went on to become NHL stars. So just think of just a simple list of players that, for the most part, all those guys are playing today and are superstars in the NHL, and were not drafted into the WHL because they weren't perceived to be good enough.
The apple will always ripen at their time. And
absolutely.
Apples are good 12 months of the year. Like I said, Wayne, I appreciate your consensus in that. We're getting close. I mean, like you said, 6 weeks away from the WHL draft. It's at a new time. It's going to be happening in December, which is kind of weird. maybe we'll start looking at some of these players that have maybe moved up in the list, perhaps, where they're coming from and how they're doing. Plus, we'll look at how maybe in the next coming weeks, how certain Western provinces that have the CSSHL have a stockpile of U15 potential players that, move up in the draft because of their development in prep academy as opposed to the AAA player playing U15. We'll look at both of those stories in the coming weeks with Wayne here on Wayne's World. Thanks so much for joining me, Wayne.
Thanks for having me, Theo. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Always on the ice here on ASTV. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Case Financial Group, Dokes Book Fuels, Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, and Toby Hockey as well. Coming up next, part 2, U15 head coach Kyle Nixon joins me from Pilot Mountain to discuss his trick-or-treating and all the Halloween specials happening this weekend as they take on the Notre Dame Hounds when they come into Blackjack Stewart this weekend for Halloween weekend here on ASTV. Stay with us. We'll be back with Kyle right after the break. Welcome to Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, your world-class academic and hockey training facility created to maximize each student's athletic and academic potential. Blackjack Stewart Arena, home of the Buffalo. Joining me on the ice TV is Coach Kyle Nixon, the U15 Pilot Mountain. Kyle, a little bit of a quieter weekend, but still a very difficult game on the Friday night versus the rink. The travel up to Winnipeg, not a long bus trip, but do you feel that it's hard for a young team to get used to that road leg sense and getting rid of the road legs as quick as possible?
Yeah, I think that being on a bus and then having to figure out how to go through a routine that gets you prepared to play has been a part of the learning process. But this hasn't been our first bus trip. We've went into the city pretty much right out of the gate to play the rink in some exhibition games. We've traveled shorter trips to Souris. We've been on the bus more than we've been at home. So I don't think at this point it's something that should be an excuse for us. And I think we get there with a lot of time to be prepared to focus mentally and to do a dynamic warm up and to go through the whole process. So I don't know if that's necessarily a reason for slow starts or success against some of those teams more than it's just a team like the Rink and Edge last weekend. They're elite teams that have guys that are almost fully developed in the top age of our league, and it's tough for us to compete against those teams at this point in the year. We're just building, and we're trying to get to that level, and that's not something that's going to happen right away.
Certainly getting the boys together early September, right around that 7th of September date. Now we're looking almost the end of October, 12 games under your belt, good mix of exhibition. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. The internet was not working for us very well with Kyle. A little bit of technical difficulties, if you will. We will put the rest of that interview with Kyle up right away here on astvproductions.com, as well as our Facebook, YouTube, and all of our media outlets. We want to thank everybody for your patience. Again, Blackjack Stewart Arena will have the U15 male team take on the Notre Dame Hounds this weekend. Saturday and Sunday, it'll be a haunted house Halloween extravaganza, I'm sure. They are certainly looking forward to having fans in the stands and serving well the black and yellow. The herd look forward to seeing everyone in attendance. We want to thank again everybody here for being on ASTV Productions, and we will see you on Thursday with a special announcement with a U20 player coming up for not Team Canada, but for another nation who is playing his hockey in Thunder Bay at Cam River, the Fighting Walleye. Mr. Colin McGill will join us here Thursday. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Well, like I said, we will put that interview up for you this evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye for now.